Welcome to the regular meeting and Finance Committee meeting of the Marin Municipal Water District Board of Directors for Thursday, August 27th, 2020. I'm calling the meeting to order, and our first item of business is to adopt the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
I need a second.
Second.
And we need a roll call vote.
Director Bragman? You're unmuted,
Larry,
sir.
I think you're muted. We can't hear you. There.
Aye.
Director Gibson?
Aye.
Director Russell?
Aye.
And Chairperson Kohler.
Aye. This is now the moment for public expression on any item that is not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments at this time?
At this time, I do not see any comments. And just wanting to let you know also that earlier we did receive 2 emails. The board received 2 emails. I have forwarded to you. It will be posted, and also know that staff has followed up with them.
Oh, great. Good to know. We received those this morning by email. Thank you for that.
Chair, I want to make a public comment.
Okay.
I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is right near Kenosha. And it's just so disheartening for me to see what is happening and what's happened in my hometown. And I know we're all feeling it, but I just don't want to let the moment pass without acknowledging what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, and also express my appreciation for the essential service that we're providing, and thanking you all for your assistance and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Larry. I think we're all right there with you. Any other director's announcements or expression?
No.
Well, then I am going to, on a somewhat lighter note, I'm going to express my congratulations to Director Russell on the birth of his extraordinarily beautiful new grandson.
Well, thank you very much.
A moment of lightness. I like that.
Exactly. A moment of lightness in these troubled times.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We're going to, our next item is the minutes of the last Finance Committee Board of Directors meeting from June 25th. I am looking for a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
And a roll call vote.
Director Bragman?
Aye.
Director Gibson?
Aye.
Director Russell?
Aye.
And Chair Kohler.
Aye. That brings us, excuse me, to the monthly financial update.
All right, good morning. Can you see my screen okay?
We can,
Yes.
thanks, Chuck.
Okay, great. All right, so this will be the financial update for the first month of the fiscal year, July. So overall, everything is tracking about as we would expect it with budget. We're about, if you go 1 month through the 12-month year, we're at 8.3% of the fiscal year. So you can see there are water revenues there, and you can see that on page 3 of your packet also. Are tracking about as you would expect. We're at $6.9 million through the month of July at 8.3%. Most of that is in the actual commodity sales. The water sales themselves, $5.2 million, and then service charges of $1.4 million. And then other revenues, which makes up rents, grants, those type of miscellaneous revenues that we get, about $300,000. And again, tracking right on with the budget that we'd expect for the revenues. So overall, our operating revenues are 8.3%. Fire flow fee, we haven't really received much there at all, immeasurable. And just, you remember we get the slugs of that revenue that comes in January and April, May timeframe with the property tax inflows. And then capital revenue, including that capital maintenance fee, were $1.1 million, 6.3% of budget. And just recall that we're not actually increasing that 4% increase in July. We deferred that, or the board deferred that until January. So we'd expect that to be a little bit slower. So monthly water sales comparison. This is the dollars. Look at this, and you can see that month of data. That blue line there is this last July 2020, and we took in about $6.8 million in revenues compared to about $5.8 million in revenues last year. And I think one of the big reasons, if you look at page 3 in your enclosures, you'll see that compared to budget, we weren't off too much. Compared to the actuals of the previous year, there's a substantial difference in the actual water sales. And when we go back and we look at the rainfall data for the past couple of years, you kind of see a pattern emerge there. So, again, based on our billing cycle, the revenues are going to lag by about 2 months. So if you go back and look at May data for rainfall, there was 7 inches last year compared to 2 inches this year. So it wasn't that we had an anomalously high year this year. It's more that we had anomalously low demand for water last year. So this is a slide that we started showing you in the past few months, just kind of breaking down the different major classes of customers that we have. And you can see there that the single family residential demand for water has increased substantially, which you would somewhat expect with the pandemic and people staying at home. Multi-units, 3 to 4 units, 5 to 9 units are basically stable. You do see a marked drop there in the duplexes. It's about a 40 or 50% drop. So actually what happened there is that drop has actually moved into single families. So last year, I believe it was Ordinance 445 was passed, which allowed people with additional dwelling units to reclassify those to single family, which allows them higher usage in the first tier for summer and winter rates. So that's where you see a lot of those are actually just moving from duplex into that single family column. And then one of the things that's been a little bit head scratching for the past few months for us is trying to see what we would expect to be a drop in commercial and industrial. And there on that line, you can see now you're finally seeing that come about. That's about a 20% drop in usage, which again, you'd kind of expect with what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a question at the last meeting from the board, and you had asked to see what our aging reports were looking like. So this is a breakdown for our aging for this July compared to last July. And you can definitely see a picture emerging there. You can see that we went from about 4,900 as of July 2019 up over 7,500 this last July. That's an increase of over 50%. So just in the 30-day past dues, you're seeing a very large expansion there. And then you can see that tail kind of carrying into the 60, 90, and 180 days.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, you can see that as we're not being as strict or not enforcing late payments, you can see that starting to have an effect there.
Mm-hmm.
This is tier consumption, and you can see pretty much the picture that you always see. Probably 90% of our consumption's in those first 2 tiers. The only thing of note there, as we talked about, you can see in July of 20 there, that second from the right bar, you can see the drop off in usage that we saw last year. And then another question that's come up from the board last time that we talked was, could we get that AMI data that's a little bit more real time? So whereas the other data that we show you lags by a couple of months because of our billing cycles, AMI data should provide a better picture. So this first slide that we're showing you is the AMI data. It's just residential, single family residence. And the areas covered there are Tiburon Belvedere, about 1,200 meters. And there you can kind of see how that how the increase is been seen You can see like a really big increase in March when we entered this. So that red line being your current year CCF, and then how it's kind of leveled off as the summer months have come. But definitely seen increased usage in the AMI data. And we also gave you a slice of the AMI data for institutional business meters. And you know, again, what you're seeing there, you see that fall off that's starting. You barely see it in March; it's almost unaffected, and then April moving through July, you see that kind of that larger fall off in the usage of business meters. This AMI data is a little bit different than the previous slide where it was Belvedere. This is a little more spread out, but the preponderance of the meters in this sample come from San Rafael, and then the remainder are kind of spread out throughout the county. So this is a little bit of a wider look at what's happening with the institutional business meters compared to the residential. So moving into expenditures, again, everything is tracking there where we would expect it to. Personnel services is right around where budget will be at 8.3%. We're at 7.8%. Maintenance operation expenses at 10.5%. So we're kind of tracking a little bit ahead of the budget, but that's pretty typical for July. Keep in mind that in July we pay our insurance premiums at $800,000 up front. So that doesn't get prorated throughout the year. So if you took that out of that $3 million there, you'd be back to right about on budget for maintenance and operations. Financing costs, those are set by bond covenants. So, those are dead on 8.5%. The capital allocation is just that labor and overhead that we allocate to capital projects. So again, right on with budget where we expect. So total operating expenses of 8.7%, tracking with budget. Fire flow projects we've only expended $100,000 on those, so behind budget. But again, you remember to our previous conversations, that was a fund that was, we were overspending a little bit, so we've kind of slowed down the work on that. Capital projects are $400,000, but those, don't necessarily move at a smooth pace throughout the year. Ending fund balances. Restricted and designated funds are $16.1 million. It's pretty stable from that $16.5 million before. Rate stabilization, fire flow funds, and pension reserve funds have not been touched. So those are still sitting at the same place they were as of June 30th, the end of the fiscal year. And then the capital fund also is still at about $25 million. Your unrestricted fund is at $20.4 million, down a bit. And I think that's because we took money out there in June to make debt service payments. So that took that fund down a little bit. So your operating fund balance to budget in months is at 2.8 months, about 3 months, about half of kind of that aspirational goal of 6 months that we strive for. Debt service coverage is very healthy at 2.7. Outstanding bond debt, we're at $142 million. And then other debt, that's just some of those smaller debts that we have, like with Las Colinas, that don't clump in with those 3 major bond issues, is at $7.5 million. So we started showing you some months back what our impacts are from COVID-19. To date, and this isn't fiscal year, this is since the COVID pandemic broke out, we've expended about $272,000. We have submitted to FEMA for some reimbursement on that. I think we're preliminarily approved for a little bit over $100,000 in reimbursements, although I would imagine that would take some time, having dealt with FEMA before. And you can see the breakdown there. A lot of the costs here are from deep spray of buildings and vehicles, sanitizers. We have some additional sick leave that we had to provide under the CARES Act. So all that together makes up about $272,000 in COVID-related expenses. And this time, that's your summary for July. So just a couple points there. Revenues, expenditures, as we mentioned, are tracking in line with budget. Our fund balances remain healthy, and COVID is an impact, but a relatively minor impact to us from a financial standpoint. So at this point, if anyone has questions.
Thanks, Chuck. I have a couple really related to a slide you went by a little while ago. It seems like we're not having, I mean, it seems like you are tracking some impact as a result of people not being able to pay bills or paying them late. Do you expect that to increase? And it also sounds like you're not seeing a significant financial hit from our decision to put a moratorium on shutoffs.
Yeah, we're not seeing a substantial hit. The only thing, you know, that I'll say to that, and we don't have the numbers yet, but when we show you the revenue from the water sales, we're showing you what we billed. So the flip side of that is that we're going to have a bad debt expense. So we would expect, you know, that's usually about $1 million a year. We would expect that will probably increase, but again, we don't know how much that's going to increase. But I would say that's definitely going to increase.
Okay, and then the bad debt expense, and it's quite helpful to have that as what we typically have as a baseline. I think I was aware, but thank you for reminding us. That is just the amount of revenue we're not collecting. That doesn't take into account the expenses that we expend in attempting to collect those debts, right?
No, that's the bad debt expense is just going to be what we don't collect.
Okay, but it sounds like at least for now, you're not seeing a very significant. Well, you should just tell us. Do you feel like you're seeing it? Are you expecting that to grow in some significant way?
You know, based on the data that I see here, I don't know that it's going to necessarily increase. I mean, these are pretty large numbers that we're seeing here. You know, taking that snapshot in July, so I don't see any reason why that won't kind of stabilize there.
Okay.
Because if you look at total, 8,700, accounts that include 30 through 365 days, that's a pretty substantial amount compared to the number of customers we have. So.
On that point, Chuck, the data we just saw, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, those are the number of outstanding ratepayers that did not pay, but that doesn't translate to the dollar amount.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah, we don't capture what size of customer those are necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, and just based on what you've seen that hasn't been presented, I'm understanding you're saying it is or is not a significant number at the moment, dollar amount.
I don't think it's significant yet, but I kind of want to hold judgment a little bit that until we do our year-end closing and see what our auditors are going to have some opinion on what we should be writing off, and this kind of data is going to sway their opinion on that.
Okay, thanks.
So I would expect that bad debt expense to increase.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I frankly, Chuck, I'm shocked that it's $1 million. That seems like a lot of money to me. If I understood the numbers, you said it was 1 million for 8,700 customers.
More than that.
More than 1 million, or 700?
It'll probably be more than 1 million, because you can see that number of delinquencies growing. So some portion of that's going to become uncollectible.
Do you mind going back to that slide so we can see what you're referring to? I just don't remember it.
Is it more than 1 million or more than 8,700? I'm still confused.
No, the million is dollars. The 8,700 is the number of accounts.
No,
so
I'm asking you if it's more than $1 million or more than 8,700. You said it was more, but you didn't say more what.
Oh no, I think the bad debt expense will be more than $1 million. It'll be more than what our normal is.
Because that number comes out to $115 per account. Where I'm headed is, it seems to me that it'd be worth pressing, not now, but pressing. If we're running at $1 million a year normally,
mm-hmm.
That's several percent of our budget, huh?
Yeah.
Just you know.
Well, it's, yeah. I mean, if you're looking at total, I'm using round numbers here, but we're at about $107 million budget. You're looking about 1%.
Right, but the revenue collected is about 60 million, right?
Yeah. So revenue collected on the water sales was, by budget's $57 million.
Right. So that's the number
Probably
we need to look at.
a little bit under
That's what
2%.
will help, is the water. So, yeah, if it was 100,000, I wouldn't be saying anything. At $1 million, it seems to me that we should give some consideration to collection once the COVID situation is straightened out, because that number, I frankly find jaw-dropping. I never realized it was that big, and maybe it was never presented that way to us. I don't know. But do you other guys remember this number, $1 million a year?
That sounds right to me. I do feel like I've heard that. And I do think we should probably, revisit this once we are past not just COVID, but the economic fallout from it. But there are a number of other things that we can be doing. There's some very significant research occurring now about ways in which water utilities can assist consumers that are in significant financial straits, and to distinguish between consumers that are, having, very legitimate hardship paying bills, and those that are in a different situation and for whatever reason are not paying their bills. But I mean, I think we need to get very granular and not take a one size fits all approach.
We've made intentionally made some concessions because of the coronavirus. What I'm unaware that we've ever done is made a plan for how we proceed after it's all settled down. I think we should do that. I mean, there's some people who simply will never be able to pay it back. There's some people presumably in that batch that are intending to pay it back themselves, or understand that's a debt and they will take care of it. So we should have a plan that says, maybe we communicate with some of them now and work out an arrangement or whatever, but at least get some, rather than just blindly moving forward.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And that's exactly what I was getting at, Jack. So thank you for putting it that way. I think we do need a plan. And I also think we need to be very intentional and recognize that we have customers that are in very, very different financial situations, and we should be taking account of that.
Right.
As you are all maybe aware, there's a growing body of literature and evidence about water debt and about how that has been devastating to families nationwide. So I just want us to be very conscious about
Absolutely. We need a very tailored approach to it, that, each account is different.
Well, I think I agree completely with you, Jack. A little more complicated than that. Is a breakdown of the 8,700 to see how many of them are, first of all, institutional commercial, if any, and see if the ones, are we just getting things where the bill comes to the previous tenant and, the current tenant says, not my problem, or something like that. How many of them are just moving on? And I realize I may not be able to address that directly, but there should be a statistical ranking of these things to see, first of all, is it the same address that's having the problem routinely, or is it a situation where it's random and it's just, this is all talking without COVID being involved. Okay, this is just the general debt collection. And I agree with Cynthia on both sides of that stick, though. You've got to look at the consumer side, and I think that primarily the issues have been in places like Flint and those, and then you need to look at the institutional side. I mean, isn't this a 18 as an example? If we're not collecting,
I could just share. We've talked about, but we haven't established, because we've been kind of waiting on the timing of COVID, but to have a general policy, to have a kind of a one-time multi-year interest-free payment program that we would put into place once we're past this. But I'm also hearing interest in understanding these numbers a little better, so we can plan for the next finance committee to bring a more granular look at this and begin to talk about how to approach these once we're out of COVID.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think Larry Russell made the point about distinguishing too between residential and business consumers. I think that's a very good idea. I would hypothesize that we're going to see some businesses that are really struggling, particularly, salons, frankly, that, we've got a lot of them. They're big water users. And, most of them have been, obviously shut down now for, more than 6 months. So I would not be at all surprised if we're looking at some really struggling local small businesses that are being affected. So I agree. I think doing a really granular look on the residential side and also on the, the business, institutional, and commercial side.
In our information we'll bring back will include 218 constraints as we see them, and perhaps some understanding on what other agencies are looking at creatively.
Could I just weigh in for a second before we leave? Just looking at the numbers, 180 days, 407,000, more than 365, 53,000. So about half of the bad debt precedes COVID. So of the bad debt, or at least delinquent debt, it appears that we've got about, maybe 650,000 in the last 90 days. And then looks like the current billing cycle, over 2 million. So I think really, I really appreciate, Chuck, you doing this aging, because I think it does give us a more granular understanding of the sort of rolling impact of COVID. And I think that it's going to be in the next 90 days that we're really going to get an understanding of how this is going to play out. And but it could be significant for sure. But if you look at the timing of the debt and the aging of the debt, it's a little bit of a different story. Although, obviously, it appears to be cumulative and not decreasing. So again, I just want to thank you for doing this, and just would request that you track it going forward to the extent that you can with these bi-monthly billing cycles.
Absolutely.
And also, I think this speaks exactly to AMI and monthly billing. If we get onto a normal footing and drop this age-old 60-day billing, which is to me, a total artifact of the way the data is collected from the past, and get this thing onto a more professional billing situation, I think it will benefit greatly. I think, Ben and Chuck, we should also be facing the reality. I think your idea is a good one about a way to pay back without interest. There's no need to charge interest, that's for sure. But I have a feeling we better grow up and sit at the big boys table here and be prepared to write off a fair portion of this money, because I think, it's a bit like the landlords. The tenant falls behind, and then, oh, it's okay, you got a year to pay it back. Well, they can't pay the rent, so how in the hell are they going to pay back the past rent? And we've got the same situation. There's undoubtedly serious and real reasons why we've seen an increase of almost $3 million in a year of this, looking at the under 30 days. Now, I don't know if that just means those haven't been paid, like people haven't got to it, or if it means that there's a real significant change going on here. Because it looks to me like there's a significant change going on.
Yeah, well, like I said, that the next phase is going to really be, I think, even more telling. But yeah, the numbers are significant and definitely need to be tracked. So
Okay.
Yeah,
it sounds like Chuck
Go
and
ahead.
as I say, it sounds like Chuck and Ben have got their arms around what we're looking for now.
yeah. But it is important for us as we consider what we're going to do with rates and everything going forward. So
Yeah, I agree. And like I say, I think there are 218 challenges, but there's also, you know, a lot of really creative thinking about ways in which water utilities can address these issues, you know, within current legal, you know, constraints. It's going to take a little bit of creativity, but I think we can get there. Are there any other board comments on this item?
You know, I just want to bring up to the board, and I brought it up to Chuck and to Ben. One of our biggest expenditures is interest. We're paying about 10 million a year. And I think it's worth looking into seeing whether there's any possibility of refinancing our bonds. And this is not something I expect any kind of quick answer. And like I said, I've talked to Chuck and to Ben about it, but I think the board needs to at least consider the possibility, as sort of outlandish as it may seem because of the fairly recent refinancing we did. But if there is a way to get into the current bond market, we could save significant amount of money for the district. So just something I want to put on the table for the board's consideration and creative thinking, because that's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, I don't think it's outlandish at all. I mean, it's part of the reason we did do the recent refinancing. So the question, I mean, I think it's a great question for Jim Gibbs, and you know, he's sort of a genius at this, and I think we should definitely consider it. Thanks for raising it.
That ship has sailed because of the agreement we have with Morgan Stanley. It doesn't even kick in until 2024. So, I mean, it's possible, but I think it's going to be a stretch to get Morgan Stanley to go, oh, well, it's okay. You know, we'll take another look at it, but we'll see.
Well, I think it's worth, I think we're just talking about having the conversation. That's all.
Correct.
And we can look at trying to get creative probably with some of those smaller issues.
Yeah.
You know, I've spoken with Mr. Gibbs, and you know, one of the problems that we have is that, you know, you can't refund these bonds until they hit the call feature in the bond. And we really, there's no real, the call provisions, and that really doesn't occur with any of the outstanding bonds until about 2026. So even on advanced refunding, you'd probably be looking about 2024 before you could actually take on one of our 3 major bonds, you know. But again, that doesn't mean that you maybe pay down or do some other things with some of these smaller debts that are outstanding, save us some interest payments.
Okay. Any other board?
One more thing. The other thing I noticed that I thought was quite interesting, Chuck, in the water data, the water use data, was, you know, you could see some impact of people being at home, but then you could see the real impact of irrigation. If you look at those numbers, they start picking up into the dry season, and they jump up a lot in terms of usage. I mean, it almost doubles between the lows and the current usage. So the point being that, you know, the real impact here and the real opportunity for reducing water flow is outside of the house. And, you know, we need to really put our thinking caps on about how, if it's even possible, but how to break the cycle of grass, because grass is where the problem is. And, you know, it's fine for England, but it's not so fine for arid places like us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Time to be considering turf rebates, but that's another conversation.
Yes, it is.
Right. Okay. Any more board comments on this item? Do we have any public comments on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay. I believe that brings us to the end of the agenda. Unless, Ben, do you have anything else?
No, we don't.
I have one question, Cynthia.
Oh, sure.
I didn't understand, Chuck, why we put off the last finance meeting. I thought the statement was that we were waiting for the year-end closing. I was a little dismayed when I heard the same statement at this meeting. Maybe I missed something about why it was put off, but I thought it was put off because you said something like the numbers aren't ready yet, but we didn't get the numbers at this meeting either. So I don't want a big, long discussion, but maybe you could just brush on it for a second about why we had to cancel the last finance meeting. Because understand that these finance meetings are really the only blood pressure monitor we have of the water district from the board standpoint. So they're quite critical, in my thinking, to keeping us appraised of what's going on.
Yeah, and that was the reason for the cancellation last time is that we're deep in year-end closing, and the June, so those numbers for June 30th are often in flux because of that year-end closing. So that's why we didn't do it last month. For the actual year-end numbers, those will be some time. We've got the auditors doing their field work here in October, so we won't have numbers, final year-end numbers. So probably December, I would imagine, would be the norm.
Well, weren't these numbers July? Did I miss something there?
Yeah, these are July. So these are through July 31st of the first year. So there's no accrual or anything that are going on into July numbers. What?
So this is standing aside of June. We don't have June then.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. That would have been helpful if you had just cut me up on that. It's a minor point, but it really confused me. So, okay.
Yeah, sorry. June is a rough month in finance.
Well, we should probably take that into account, Cynthia, in the future planning. Maybe we should that finance meeting in June instead of just scheduling it routinely like we have been.
That's a good idea.
Just something to think about.
Absolutely. Okay. I think, unless there's nothing else, I think we are adjourned.
Okay. Thank you. And thank
Thanks, everybody.
Hey.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.